Mark Rogers, TV, always talking college football 24/7, 365. But please understand that while we talk about the game we love, we understand the situation in Las Vegas, and our hearts and our prayers go out to the family and friends of the victims involved in that horrific incident. Talking Miami football with a big game against Florida State on the road in Tallahassee. We bring in Isaiah Kim Martinez of the Miami Hurricane to discuss the 3-0, the 2-0, the 3-0 Canes. I'll get it right. Just had to run down the schedule there. They're a little bit behind the rest of college football, as we've discussed in the past, because of Hurricane Irma. But looking good against Duke, Isaiah. I've got to tell you that I was extremely impressed, starting with that, what we anticipated could be a dominant front seven on defense, and they surely showed it against Duke.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that Manny Diaz is pretty happy with his team this past weekend. For the first time, probably this whole season, the defense kind of showed exactly what all the hype around them preseason was all about. You know, they showed, I think they had over 10 tackles for loss, multiple sacks, interception. You know, you name it, 2 or 3 pass breakups. That defense really showed up against Duke. You know, and obviously that secondary being young. That front seven being the majority, the main part of that team, you know, they really showed exactly what they could do versus Duke.
Isaiah Kim Martinez joining us from the Miami Hurricane, where he is the sports editor and covers, of course, Miami football, sports across the board, but the Hurricanes off to a nice start and much expected of the Canes' play to win the Coastal Division finally here in 2017. Malik Rocher, of course, a topic from the time that he was named the starter. I don't want to say that it was a controversial choice, but it certainly was a competitive battle, and N'Kosi Perry is the guy that everyone's looking forward to. But much to be gained from this season and trying to win an ACC championship. And your thoughts about his development? It's been spotty, but I thought in the Duke game, sure, he missed some throws. Almost every quarterback in the country misses throws, but he seemed to run the offense, and he got off to a hot start, cold middle, and then he seemed to finish strong.
Yeah, when you start off completing your first 9 passes, I mean, you kind of expect the game to just keep going in that direction. The Canes obviously started very hot offensively and defensively for that matter. But then Rozier, you know, in the third quarter, you saw him a couple passes on the interception, obviously a route where Amon Richards was wide open, but on a couple others, saw some passes go awry, you know, in places where, oh, where's the receiver? You know, it wasn't in that area. According to Rick, he says that the routes were the correct routes. He made the correct reads. Just the throw wasn't there. And like you said, it happens a couple times a game for all quarterbacks, let alone, you know, someone who's only playing his third start of this season, you know. But considering all that, what I notice about him especially is when he makes that interception or he makes that bad throw, so to speak, or that throw that isn't quite on point, he almost always comes back stronger on the following possession, and he makes a difference either by, I know in the Toledo game, right after he threw the interception, on that following drive, he rushed for the touchdown that pretty much sealed the game. After the interception versus Duke, he came right back, and obviously we had that Amon Richards play that pretty much sealed the game for Miami, and obviously that was a slant pass in that situation, but still he hit his target, and it turned out to be a score. So with Rozier especially, obviously he got off to a hot start, but more than anything, I like to see that he can hit his targets, but even when the game starts to get a little bit more difficult at times, he's able to come back from that and improve and not let that rattle him, especially in an environment like Duke going into Florida State, you know, and even 10 times as hard of an environment, you want to make sure you have kind of that mental toughness to be able to succeed in that area.
It's time to talk Miami football with Isaiah Kim Martinez. You can join him at the Miami Hurricane, the on-campus site for Miami football coverage. Let's talk about your 2 stars. Mark Walton with a huge game against Toledo. It was obvious that Duke thought, okay, we've got an inexperienced quarterback who's been inconsistent through 2 games against lesser opponents. Let's load up on Walton, make sure that he doesn't beat us. And he didn't necessarily beat Duke as a running back, carrying the football, 17 carries for 51 yards. I was extremely impressed again with his receiving ability. He still hobbled with the ankle late in the game. There was another scare with him laying on the field and having to be helped off the field. Amon Richards, another star who got his first action against Duke. only caught 3 passes, but made them count. Very difficult catches. Rocher made a couple difficult throws down the sideline, and Richards, of course, broke the big one across the middle and outran the defense despite probably struggling just slightly from the hamstring still. So the 2 stars a bit hobbled, but obviously they make their presence known and need to come up big against FSU.
Yeah, no doubt. When it comes to, Hurricanes football, I would say that so far this season, Mark Walton has been the guy, especially for those first couple games that really led our team. Receiving wise, Amon Richards coming back has such a big impact on this team because this is a team that already has great depth at receiver. Between Braxton Berrios and I think there was a stat that I saw the other day that 6 different receivers have scored in the past 3 games, just 3 games alone, 6 different receivers. So depth is a strength of this team. But when you bring back Richards into the mix, you saw against Duke what he could do. I think that improves it so much to the fact where it's now you have Berrios to worry about and you have Amon Richards coming back. I think you'll see some other receivers against FSU open up that much more just because the defensive backs will be so focused on guys like Amon Richards. And I think him coming back, even if you don't necessarily see him every game on the stat sheet explode onto the scene and score for over 100 yards and a touchdown or 2, I think you'll see that he will be drawing a lot of attention, and that will continue to help with the depth of other receivers. And, of course, Mark Walton, the Canes hope that he is healthy. When Rick was asked this past weekend that he was basically talking about how he's going to be spending a lot of time in the training room this week and didn't give a whole lot of detail. Mark Walton, if you ever ask him, he almost always will say he's okay unless the doctors rule him out prior to. So we'll see kind of how he handles it and whether he'll be 100% going to FSU. But no doubt those 2 guys being the fuel to that offense on the receiving and rushing end, they're going to be huge.
It's Miami, it's Florida State, and despite some struggles on the Florida State side at 1-2 at this point, should be a good one in Tallahassee, ESPN 3:30 Eastern time this Saturday. And let's talk a little bit about the Noles. They lose the first 2 games. Of course, DeAndre Francois has been taken off the field for the last time here in 2017, and he will not be leading the offense. You've got James Blackman in play, and he has struggled as expected. He has a lot of development and growth to undergo, and the plan was certainly not for him to be on the field. But Florida State squeaks by Wake Forest, a team that they typically beat by 3 or 4 touchdowns, and they win in the last 50 seconds. They still have what could be a great defense. I don't think it's playing great, but can be a great defense. Miami, suddenly the narrative changes so quickly where Miami's a top 15 to 20 team preseason. Florida State's the top 5 team vying for a national championship, or so we thought. And then it kind of flips, and Miami gets past its first big hurdle in the Coastal, another big game here toward winning the ACC and becoming nationally relevant, while Florida State's just trying to survive the season and pull off an upset here, or I don't know what the line says, but at this point. So your thoughts about what you know about the Noles and what you've seen thus far?
When you lose a guy like Francois, it's going to affect your entire season. I mean, in a sport that's already so quarterback heavy, and someone like him, who had a successful first year last year after redshirting his first year at FSU last year, he was very good and showed a lot of promise coming into this year. When you lose him on the first game to Alabama, which is already tough matchup to win, but then not only do you lose, but you lose him. Insert a freshman who weighs about $170, and you can see when he's playing, and he's not a very big guy, and you wonder how many hits he can take. Obviously, doesn't have a lot of experience, period. It has a huge effect on your season, and I think, honestly, that has taken a little toll on that defense that was so highly ranked coming into the season, because when you lose your quarterback, I can only imagine that it would have an effect on your defense as a whole, knowing that more is going to be expected of you as the offense tries to get through this struggle. Obviously, they like to get the run game going like they did against Wake Forest, and they did successfully. But against a team like Miami, being the best one, the best one that Blackman has seen this far after NC State and Wake Forest, you have to imagine that Miami's going to be kind of letting him throw a little bit and seeing what he has kind of to offer. And obviously, we're going to plug up the run game. That's going to be our focus, and kind of going to let him beat us. And to this point, it doesn't necessarily look like he's all too ready for that matchup. So I would say Miami's defense right here has a huge advantage going up against a freshman. Playing Miami, playing his first ranked opponent to this point, it's a lot to ask for a freshman.
We've got Isaiah Kim Martinez from the Miami Hurricane on the line, getting us prepped for Florida State hosting Miami. Isaiah, can you give us a feel for what it's like on campus, Florida State week? I know that it's, from their perspective, not as big a game as it typically would be because of their aspirations, but it's a rivalry that's matched by only a few across the country. I don't know where you're from, but within the state of Florida, can you give us a feel for how big this one is?
To be honest, the feel was obviously you're excited as if you're around here and you're a fan of the Canes, because anytime you can play FSU, no matter what they're ranked, especially when you're ranked higher, you really kind of want to just pummel them into the ground. That's kind of how this rivalry's always been. But even more, there's been this little kind of, I wouldn't say fear, but this kind of thought in the back of their minds, especially before the Wake Forest game, like, oh, like if they go 0-3, they lose to Wake Forest, they might seek out their revenge against us, type of thing. Like worried that they would carry some momentum at home, and you can't imagine a team like Florida State going 0-4 or going 1-3. So just that thought in the back of your mind that when you play a team that almost has been on a roll, you almost feel like you can be that surprise team. But on the other hand, if a team's been on a drought or a team's been really struggling, you don't want to be that team that they finally figure it all out against. Florida State, what if they figure out the defense and they suddenly have a dominant performance against Miami? So I would say the fans here are definitely confident going in, but they also are kind of preaching that let's not be complacent type thing. FSU, no matter what they're ranked, they're still Florida State. They still got that program, still got that defense. So don't go in there thinking just because of their season so far that it's just going to be Miami dominant and suddenly you get punched in the mouth because they figured it out one game and they caught you by surprise. So it's almost been this excitement, but also let's make sure that we take care of business as if they were ranked in the top 5 still.
There's no question. To your point, it's a wounded team physically, of course, mentally, emotionally. They had aspirations to vie for a college football playoff, and those have been squelched within 2 weeks of playing. And suddenly they're the wounded team. They're the down team. They're the team that's striving for respect and to make a statement. And on top of that, there's a number of teams across the country like that. But then you add to that formula Florida State talent. So they've got as good a talent as anyone in the country. It's just somewhat circumstantial that they're in this place, and faced Alabama the first week as well. So it's been the imperfect storm, I guess, for them in a lot of cliches and puns that you can wrap up in that one. But here they are, and nobody wants to play them down the stretch. And Blackman should just get better and better and better. And then they've got all the NFL athletes all over the place. So they're going to be a tough out for anybody down the stretch. Clemson's coming for them sometime in late October, November. But yeah, for Miami, it's a Florida State, and whoever's on top in the rivalry in regards to rankings and position nationally and within the ACC is always got to beware. All right, Isaiah Kim Martinez from the Miami Hurricane. We appreciate Isaiah, you jumping on here, helping us set up a Miami, Florida State, giving us some Hurricanes coverage because people want to hear about Miami football. So we try to deliver as much as possible. So we appreciate you helping us out.
No problem. Anytime.